how we treat our employees directly reflects on our customer satisfaction, customer loyalty, as well as other business metrics. There is a very strong relationship. What we don't realize and conflate sometimes is fear with inspiration. You might get short-term results when you mistreat people, when you rule by fear, but those will not sustain over the long term. If we want to produce results for the long term, we have to really treat them as human beings. We have to really be intentional in managing pressure and power mindfully, with care. And no matter where you start in managing pressure and power, you can get there. It's not about going on silent retreats for months. It's actually about practical, simple tools that you consistently follow.
Sabina, I'm very excited to have you on the Core Impact podcast. I would like to start directly by asking you, what is your intention behind writing your book, You're the Boss?
Wow. You get right down to business, Omar. Thank you for having me on your show. The intention is to make the world a better place. Let's start with that biggest picture. Whenever I tell people I was writing a book about bosses, they went, "Oh, you won't believe that boss that I've had," right? Everybody has a story about that boss. And as a manager, you impact a very large number of people. So helping provide some tools, some very concrete, practical ways in which managers can improve themselves and improve how they manage teams and businesses has a much bigger footprint. That's one of the reasons for writing the book. The other is I'm an executive coach, as you know. That's what I do for a living. That's a rather exclusive benefit that others have. Not everybody can afford to work with an executive coach. This book democratizes for $30, you can get executive coaching because I've poured my 25 years of executive coaching experience into the book through 12,000 pages of information I collected by interviewing folks who work for the clients that I coach. Like, what's it like to work for this boss? The last piece I want to say, Omar, is that there's a very personal reason for writing this book because I, at one point, from being the best boss, what people told me, to the worst boss. And that's after I came back to work from parental leave, working with the highest levels of the organization, with an infant at home. I morphed overnight from being caring, empathetic, nurturing to snippy, short-tempered, micromanaging, rushed. So and then thinking that I'm being efficient, but then realizing the effects of that, where people were crying in their offices because of what I said to them, made me stop in my tracks, made me realize this is what I want to do, is to treat people with humanity. And how do I bring that to everyone else around me? Because nobody wakes up, at least nobody that I know wakes up saying, let me make my team miserable today. And yet, corporate life is filled with stories of people who are miserable working for certain bosses. Change that.
And one of the reasons I heard from you is pressure. So when you feel the pressure, then you pass it on to others. So you have to deal with it with yourself first, right?
Absolutely. So, we like to say that power corrupts. I actually think that's wrong. I think pressure is what corrupts. Pressure, it's everywhere. It's constant. It affects bosses and employees alike. And what do we do under pressure? More often than not, we snap. We lose patience. We become sharper and meaner in our comments, meaner than we intend. And when bosses act out that way on employees, what do employees do? They play video games. Research even shows they deliberately make mistakes. That raises pressure even more because now you're not getting the results that you really wanted to get. Yes, pressure is the silent corrupter.
Is there something that you changed your mindset or learned in the last 12 months, something new about leadership and success in general?
in the last 12 months?
Yes.
Wow, that's a great question. Yes, because I coach CEOs and the senior most executives, of course, I help them raise their awareness, use some tools to become better. One of the things I realized, though, is the thematic complaints people have, particularly about CEOs and also about managers in general, is this person moves too fast. They're dropping things on me at short notice.
Mm.
They don't understand what it takes to get things done on the ground. That is all true. And every manager, all the way up to CEO, should work on improving that, on bringing people along, on pacing themselves in a way that people can tolerate it, not just tolerate it, but enjoy it.
Mm.
And the realization I had is stop just fixing the boss. What
Mm.
if you actually want that CEO to move faster than everybody else? You want them to look further ahead into the future. Because isn't that what they're paid to do? Is the company going to be in trouble if they slow down too much? Or if they don't look at the future and bring in new ideas for people to try? Absolutely. So, what if we were to rent the idea that this is actually necessary? Exactly how they do it could be refined and changed. And yes, hopefully they're working with a coach or we can give them some feedback on it. But if this is necessary, then shouldn't the rest of us shift how we both manage up and how we account for our time? I often tell people, look, if you know that you're going to get at least 2 requests from your manager this week, then that shouldn't be a surprise. You know that. It's a predictable pattern. You might not know the exact content of it. So, what if you were to carve out 2 hours in the week, or maybe an hour every day, to accommodate just such an event from happening?
What do you do in these 1 hour every day or 2 hours every week?
Mm. I think it's basically those unexpected things that your boss is putting on your lap. It gives you the space and the time to deal with them. And because usually no one budgets for that time.
Mm.
Their calendars are already full, their emails are overflowing, their Teams and Slack channels are exploding. So nobody really takes the time. It gets squeezed in lieu of your workout time or in lieu of family time or eating healthy. And so what if you were to start to create that buffer, if you will, to create that holding space where you can deal with the unexpected?
Mm. Is it related to, you said before that we are human beings, we are not human doings, right?
Yes.
And is it what also it was in your book that this advice to take 2 hours doing nothing here? This is what you are talking about.
No, this is very different.
Okay.
So let me explain that concept. This is a concept I tell people. One of the ways to deal with pressure is to actually do absolutely nothing.
Mm.
Absolutely nothing. Because what is our default? I mean, Omar, let me ask you this question. When you are under pressure, what do you tend to do by default? Before you stop to really think about it, what do you tend to do?
I mean, if I'm unaware, I will
Yeah,
go in this to this survival mode, flight or flight or fight. Yeah.
yeah, yes. And in that survival mode, do you get busier?
Um, yeah. I mean, the first thing that I'm learning to is not to react. The most important thing is just to
That's when
take
you're
it.
more conscious.
Yeah. But usually under pressure, I think I freeze sometimes. Yes.
Mm, mm. Yeah, so we either freeze, we flight, we fight, we get more frantic often,
Mm,
right?
mm,
So whether it shows up in a lot more activity, emails and meetings, or whether it shows up in a bunch of sticky notes now stuck to my monitor, or whether you're waking up at 3 in the morning with your brain racing. So there's all this do, the
mm,
human being part. And that just adds to the pressure. It just adds to the frenzy. And it makes everybody else around you more anxious and frenzied and increases pressure. Instead, this practice of blank space is taking 2 hours a week where you do absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. So, what does that mean and why would we do that? It's actually unplugging, going away from your office, likely going away from your home, not reading, not being online, not talking to anyone else. Why? Because research shows that our biggest insights, when do they come? In the shower, when our brain has the chance to rest, when we can sift out the signal from the noise. So those insights will, when we're under pressure, we think, oh my gosh, I don't have the answer to this. How am I going to figure this out? Well, that actually you likely have that answer. You've just shoved it down with all the noise and activity around you. And this gives you that opportunity for clarity. It also helps put things in perspective. All those sticky notes, all the stuff that you have that you're worried about, it suddenly goes, well, is that really that important? Here's the big picture. So it allows you to be more strategic. So that's what I'm talking about with blank space and having that time. I have had clients who've used blank space regularly. And after doing it consistently, one client completely changed their discipline. They moved from one discipline to a completely different discipline. Another client who identified a big vulnerability they had in the Asia market and got promoted levels up to improve on that.
Here, we talk about 2 hours. Do you think 2 hours is enough,
Hmm.
or this is the starting point?
Well, it's sort of the middle point. Let's put it that way. When I first started experimenting with my clients on blank space, we looked at 4 hours. That was too much for most people to do on a regular basis every single week. And over time, through various trials and errors, I've arrived at 2 hours, which is actually something you can do. It requires some attention, it requires some strategy and technique, which we can talk about, but you can do that if you really want to. There are clients who've gone on 3-day retreats just by themselves, where they sit and draw, create mind maps, doodle, whatever it is they need to do, ponder some big questions. So, absolutely, you can use it as a launching point. Once you have built enough muscle strength, enough stamina to do 2 hours, it's like working out. And therefore, why I say it's a midpoint is that 2 hours can be very difficult, not just logistically, more importantly, emotionally, for someone to just sit. It's like asking someone who's never meditated to meditate for 2 hours. That's not going to happen. You know, for me, I'm a big fan of micro habits. I know you've read the book. It's tiny. Like I have a daily meditation practice, but that entails literally one inhale and one exhale. That's it. That's what I do every day. So, similarly with blank space, if you're starting out, what if you simply did 30 seconds? 30 seconds with no device, no distraction. You just turn your back to work, turn your back to everything else, and just spend 30 seconds on that. Once you've built that up for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, even 30 seconds, you'll notice how difficult it is if you've never done it. Once you've built that up, add another 15 seconds and so on to slowly work your way up to 2 hours. If you ever find yourself slipping, that means you've gone too far too fast. Reduce it by half.
That's something similar that I noticed about myself with journaling,
Yeah,
because this is another practice that I'm cultivating. And when I feel like I'm doing so much, I want to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 every day, then it's hard for me to sustain. Yeah.
it is. It is. So what
Mm.
do you do? Like you just do it in a very small way?
I mean, there were many things. Journaling, there's no right way to do it. So
Yeah.
I write like what is the most important thing that happened the previous day or by the end of the day. what are the most important 3 things that I want to do the next day,
Right.
things
Nice.
that I'm grateful for, etc. But when I put like so many kind of rules for myself, then I couldn't sustain it. And then in the end, the most important thing is just write the most important 3 things I want to do after. And this is another thing that I want to ask you. Before the to-do list is to-be list. So I ask myself, who do I want to be? For example, today I'm living as a courageous Omar, for example. Then I take courageous actions based on this, who I am first. And this is something that reminds me of you were talking about the difference between being and becoming. How can you explain it in a simple, practical way?
Mm, mm. I love this having a to-be list instead of a to-do list. I am going to remember that. And Omar, I'm going to share that with my clients. That is so wise. Because as a manager, of course, if I set an intention of how I want to be, how I want to show up, that's so much more important than everything that I have to check off my list. Because that's
Mm,
the checking off of the list, the to-do will almost automatically take care of itself when you're showing up, because that's about being intentional and being strategic. So your question was the difference between being and becoming.
mm,
Well, I have to share the story that led to that insight, which was I was quite successful in my career in software at Microsoft, and then had a sabbatical for 8 weeks. For the first time in my life, I think, I left 5 of those weeks unplanned, more organic.
mm,
That doesn't mean I was doing absolutely nothing. I actually started a nonprofit theater company with my husband and helped out some colleagues of my father in law, all of that. But I did have a lot more spare time. You could think of it as almost a 5 week blank space exercise.
mm,
And because of that, I had this sudden moment of clarity that I was going to become a corporate vice president in the company. Now, would that happen instantly? No, I still have to spend another few years to get there, but I knew the formula. And then the thing that most surprised me was a feeling of boredom. Like, well, if I know how to do it, why do I want to spend the next 3 years of my life chasing it? I don't need to prove this to anyone else. And that's what hit me, Omar, was that I had spent all this time trying to become, to
mm,
chase, to become the next most senior person, the person to have the next bigger whatever, bigger, brighter, shinier, more, more, more. Whereas actually there could be a lot more joy in just being,
mm,
chasing what is coming next, but savoring what is there right now
mm,
and taking full advantage of it, being radically present, appreciating. You talked about gratitude in your journal. What about just opening our eyes and appreciating what we have? So that's the difference for me between being and becoming. And how do you do that in a practical way, which was again, a very wise question from you? There's something about simply perhaps asking yourself some questions
mm,
along the lines of what we're discussing. But here's the other thing that helps me become every single day. And it's a thing you have to renew every day because the pressures on us and the expectations of society, of culture, of other people who we may not want to disappoint push us towards becoming all the time. So I call this the power of the shower, is that in the shower every single day, I think about one thing or one person that I'm grateful to.
mm,
This morning, I was grateful to my calf muscles because I had gone for a very long run
mm,
this weekend. And I was just really grateful that my body and particularly my calves were strong enough to carry me for those 14 and a half miles. Someday I might be grateful to something my husband did or a friend from a long time said to me, and suddenly that's coming back to me. So just practicing that gratitude of what am I grateful for right now brings me back into that being self of appreciating I'm in a good place. I have abundance. I don't need to become.
Mhm. Mhm.
There's a big distinction here. Doesn't mean you give up your ambitions, your desire to do things. You absolutely want to keep doing that. It's just you're not chasing it.
While you are listening to the Core Impact podcast, please take a moment to pause and share with me. How do you feel? Are you enjoying the conversation, feeling inspired, or something else? I would love to know your feelings in the comments. That reminded me of one of my previous guests, Anna Maria Shaw. She said the process you take to get to the future is the future you get. What I understood from her that like my daily activities, everything that I do right now is the future that I'm getting, because if I'm used to overworking, for example, and always be the first person to come to work and the last person to leave and take all the pressure on myself and say yes to everything, etc., to get to something, this is being something, probably it's the same thing. When I become this wherever position that I'm chasing, I cannot then say I will be happy and then I will slow down, because this is how I trained myself and everyone else, that this is who I am, right?
Yes. 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 You've trained everyone to be dependent on you. For you to have all the answers. I mean, this is something I talk about in the book called the sole provider trap, where I think I'm the only one. And everybody will let you do that because
Mm.
it keeps everyone else off the hook. Yeah.
What are the biggest misconceptions that leaders have about what high performer is?
Hmm. Well, one of the misconceptions is confusing activity with impact.
Mm.
Now, every manager will say, of course, it's the impact. It's not the what, it's the so what. But who do we reward? The
Mm.
person who is coming in at 6 a.m. and working till midnight, the person who's responding to emails before it's even hit my own inbox. We reward activity all the time. And this leads to something called that busyness trap.
Mm.
As a society, we love to talk about how busy we are. It's almost a status symbol, a badge of pride. I mean, imagine going to a party and you meet somebody you haven't seen in a bit and they go, how are you? Busy? And what are you supposed to say?
Mm.
I actually like to think of myself as not somebody who chases busy. I have a full calendar and it's all choiceful. But if I tell somebody, no, I'm not busy, what are they going to think? Oh, here comes a loser. They have they have nothing important to contribute. Nobody wants to talk to them. Nobody wants them, right? So there are all these expectations packed around busy, around activity, and that is a trap. It's a mistake. It again accelerates and underscores pressure and not in the best way. It doesn't bring
Mm.
out the best of ourselves.
Mm. Sabina, since also you work with leaders, I have a question here. It's gonna be a bit detailed, so and it has also different parts. But it all comes to the connection between leadership and profit. So strong leadership cultures can increase profitability. Some study shows by 20 to 25% in certain circumstances. So the question, first one is general question. How do you see the connection between leadership and financial performance?
There's a huge body of research that shows how we treat our employees directly reflects on our customer satisfaction, customer loyalty, as well as on our other business metrics. There is a very strong relationship. Now, what we don't realize and conflate sometimes is fear with motivation or inspiration. You might get short term results when you mistreat people, when
Mm.
you rule by fear, but those will not sustain over the long term.
Mm.
I had somebody tell me, it's okay. I want to run them really hard, and it's okay with me if 30% of them leave at the end of every major launch. That was a couple of decades ago. I don't think we can do that anymore, given the pressures we have, given the financial pressures organizations are facing. So if we want our people to stay for the long term and to produce results for the long term, we have to really treat them as human beings. We have to really be intentional in managing pressure and power mindfully with care. And no matter where you start in managing pressure and power, you can get there. It's not about having a personality transplant. It's not about going on silent retreats for months. It's actually about practical, simple tools that you consistently follow. So it's a choice, it's an action. Leadership is an action, it's a verb.
And Sabina, here, the second part of the question. From your experience and with leaders, and also your corporate experience, what do you see the top 3 factors that drive sustainable performance and long-term financial success for individuals, teams, and companies?
Okay. Let's see if I can remember this throughout the answer. So first, on an individual level, it's about actually consciously managing your pressures. So recognizing where are you jumping in where you don't need to jump in. That sole provider tendency of I'm the only one. Now that's really hard to do, and it also involves letting your ego out of the way. So managing that aspect of pressure. The other one is around what's called your hidden hungers, your inner hungers, your unmet hungers. And just like when you go grocery shopping when you're hungry, what do you buy, Omar? If you go really hungry to the grocery store?
I buy everything.
Yes, exactly, right? All the things that you know better not to do in your less weak moments. Similarly, when we go to work hungry for praise, affirmation, safety, superiority, wanting to prove I'm the smartest person, relevance, we indulge in junk behaviors. We grasp for that connection a little bit too desperately. We push out other people. We lose curiosity. So managing your unmet hungers is another piece of it. Okay, so not being the first person and the only person to jump in, building more capacity in the broader organization, managing your inner hungers. What would be the third piece? Would have to do with power. And because power distorts communication, everything people say upward is turned down. It's milder than what they're experiencing. It's cushioned in praise. When an employee says, "You're doing fine, boss," what they really mean is, "I've started a secret group chat about your management habits." So how do you know? How do you create a listening system that is truly a listening system? It's not rocket science. The quality of feedback you get is directly proportional to the quality of questions you ask. So instead of just saying, "How did that go?" or "How did I do?" Of course, the answer is going to be, "You did fine, boss." The question you might want to ask is specific and small. What's one thing that went well? What's one thing that could be improved further? And if people are hesitant to answer even that, make it third person. If my fan were here, biggest fan were here, what would be the one thing they would say? If my biggest critic were here, what would be the one thing they would say? So now you're going to get more quality feedback. So on an individual level, those are 3 things. I think the team and organization, I'm just going to answer them together, is really first about back to that sole provider. It's around figuring out how you use delegation mindfully. See, when I tell people you're the sole provider, you're jumping in too much, they say, "But, if I don't do it, no one else will do it, or they won't do it as fast, they won't do it as well." Well, that's because you haven't trained them. And that's because most people, just about everybody I coach, makes this one critical error in delegation. They treat delegation like an on-off switch. Here, I'm delegating to you, so I wash my hands of it, you go do it. The problem is, you come back on Friday and give me something that you think is great, and I don't. There goes my weekend because now I'm going to redo everything you did because I'm supposed to meet with my boss with this on Monday. And there goes your self esteem. There goes our relationship. And the whole team is watching this.
Mm,
So, what if we treated delegation as a dial instead of a switch? Depending on the knowledge, experience, and competence of each person, you slowly notch up the dial. So, the first step of the dial might be you do the job, you just have them watch. Then you might teach them. The reason we do it in this sequence is this. Then maybe you give them a very prescriptive set of steps. And perhaps you then start to coach them over time.
mm,
What else did you try? What made you choose this option versus the others? What's the risk to this one? And only then do you do the safety net piece where you go, okay, I trust you, I've got your back.
mm,
All of these cases, the thing you do not want to do is completely abdicate. You want to have check-ins, so you're not waiting till Friday,
mm,
right before your big deadline or meeting to see the full result. You can do smaller course corrections as you go along the way. So that would be one thing around managing the organization and the team for high performance is using the delegation dial. So the delegation dial is definitely one of those. Another might be organizationally to create a map. And I'll stop with this one. This map is, look, one of the most dangerous things, see, power creates a gap, right? It creates a big divide between us and those who have less power than us. And one of the most dangerous effects of a power gap is what it does to our team's imagination.
mm,
People on the low end of that power pole make up stories about what a manager is thinking, specifically what they're thinking about us.
mm,
So a manager says, hey, can we chat? And we think, oh my gosh, I better update my resume. They're
mm,
frowning because they have a blister on their toe, and you're thinking, oh, there goes my bonus. Or they hate my idea. When that's not actually true, but the power gap at work, it replaces logic with certainty. Certainty about a story you've made up. So, one of the ways you can deal with that with your team is to create a map, which is like a user's guide to you. You can decode your behaviors. So, a map is basically a user's guide. It helps decode you. You call out the behaviors that you think are going to cause misunderstanding or these people making up these stories that are not necessarily true. So, for example, I have a rather serious thinking face. And so I can tell people, when you see that, I don't hate your idea. I actually am really intrigued by your idea and I'm thinking about it.
mm,
Give me, right? Or another client of mine who was really pretty much unresponsive before 10 in the morning because he just wasn't a morning person. And
mm,
people were, he hated them. So he could say, look, I'm just not a morning person. So when I'm not responding to your chit chat, it's because of that. I'm not sentient until my second cup of coffee. Just have meetings with me after 10 a.m. So you could create a map with 5 or 6 of your specific quirks and explain to people to help bridge that power gap.
mm.
Now people are not spending their time making up stories, talking to each other about the stories they made up, and spending more time being productive, creating the business results and success that you're looking for.
So we talked about the first one on an individual level. You said, first of all, being aware not to say yes to everything. And the second one is manage your hunger. So you also gave the example of the grocery store. And the third one is to ask qualitative questions. On the team and organizational level, the first one is managing the delegation, and the second one is managing the power gap, right?
Yes, yes. Through using a map, through using helping others understand your actions, your behaviors.
Mm. And
Yeah.
do you have another one that came to your mind, maybe on a team and company level? What?
Well, it's about clarity. And
Mm,
again, because of the distortion of the volume of power, we sometimes think everything that's coming out of a boss's mouth is high priority. And pretty soon we go, oh my God, I'm drowning because I have all these high priorities. And instead, if you simply use numbers, so you might say on a scale of 1 to 10, this is a 2 or this is an 11. Now I have a better sense of both your emotional read of it as a manager, as well as your level of importance of this topic.
Mm. The question that I'm asking myself, where is the balance between being authentic and being adaptable with this changing world? Simple example, I'm not sure about the statistic itself, but I heard from a coach that over 90% of applicants, when they apply for a job, they use AI to change their whole application to fit into the position they are applying for. And even if the number is not true, I think it is probable that something like this is happening. And here, is this smart, or this is something that you are in a way being adaptive to the changing situation, everything that's happening with AI? Because if you don't do this, you might be left behind. At the same time, where is your authentic self? And you also said that sometimes authenticity is an excuse not to grow. So where do you find the balance between these two?
Yeah, that's such a great question because if we back to adaptability and growth, if we were truly, truly, truly authentic, we would still be our 2-year-old selves having a hissy fit on the grocery store floor when we didn't get our lollipop, right? So, so you definitely need to keep adapting and growing. And if we just say, "Oh, I've got to be me. I've got to be my authentic self," it can sometimes be a shield, a ruse for not growing. If we unpack what it truly means to be authentic, I believe it's about my values. What are the values that I'm not willing to compromise on?
Mm,
Or, you know what? We compromise our values on a regular basis in favor of some other value that might be more important. So, what's the hierarchy of my values? How do I
mm,
stack?
mm,
How am I clear and am I informed through my values? And then can I keep changing, shifting, adapting? Forget the future. Even if you think about the different roles you play today, you might be a parent, you might be a friend, you might be an executive, you might be an employee to your boss. You're going to show up in slightly different ways in each of those arenas, in each of those roles. Which of those is your true authentic self? All of them.
mm, mm, mm. I like this example. Is there anything that you'd like to add more here? I don't want to jump into the next question before reflecting on this with you.
Yeah, I love your capacity to reflect, Omar. And with authenticity, so the question would be, what do I do with that? One thing you could do is just create a list of values and which values are you willing to compromise in favor of which ones?
Mm,
And then also talk about how do people see you right now?
mm,
Which of those continue to be relevant and serve you today? And which one of those might you shift?
mm.
See, the people around you hope that you won't change at all. Very convenient for them.
Mm,
See the same person, and consistency is super important. That's why you would take just one thing and say, the signals right now require me to be tougher or softer on my people. Okay, so how do I make a tiny shift in that regard?
mm. So the most important thing is to be clear on my values, and even better to prioritize them. Like put, for example, these are my top 3 core values. I will not compromise on these 3 values. And maybe I put, for example, the up to 10, and then I see which ones I can deal with, etc. So this is the first one. And the second one is to see how people perceive me. This is another thing that I find also very interesting. So there's another podcast, and speaker was saying self-awareness has 2 components. First of all, to be aware of myself. And the second one is to be aware of how others perceive me.
For sure.
And as a leader, that's very important because this is all about communication and how the team feels around you, right? What are the tips you give for leaders to be aware of how their team feel around them or how they perceive them?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, that's the part with the questions that I talked about, the feedback questions. That's what I ask people to do, is to design the feedback questions in a way that they're going to get more honest responses or
Mm,
more specific responses rather than just, oh, you're great, and a big pat on the shoulder, a lot of reassurance. You're getting quality feedback. So that is the biggest piece, I would say.
mm,
Another thing at the end of my book is a section called 360 Yourself, which is a set of 40 questions that help raise your awareness of which pressure pitfalls or power gaps you're falling into without even asking other people. So look at those and go to the chapter that corresponds with that. You don't even have to read the whole book, just go to that chapter. If you don't want to answer all 42 questions, here are two to think about. People don't disagree with you ever.
mm,
That's
mm,
or you use yeah, but as a justified stance, where
mm,
whenever somebody gives you something, at least in your head, even if you don't say it out loud, you've got a long justification with a yeah, but. Those are two cues to know not everything is on track and you might need to dig deeper.
mm. The last part of the podcast, I like to ask guest questions about the future of work. And the first question I would like to ask you, what are, from your work with leaders, your perception, the biggest blind spots that many leaders still have about the future of work and the changes that's happening?
Wow, that's a big question. One of the biggest blind spots is underestimating the pace at which changes are happening.
Mm,
I believe those changes are happening at an exponential level. In other words, I think this was like a kid's book that I'd read once where they talked about these lily pads that doubled in number on a pond. And, day one, you wake up and you see a lily pad on the pond and you say, isn't that pretty? And day two, there are two and you go, oh, cute. Day four, you think, these lily pads are growing quite a bit. At some point, I need to clean up the pond. Until one day, half the pond is full with lily pads. And you think, you know what? Tomorrow, for sure, I'm going to go clean this out. Except because they double in size, tomorrow the entire pond is filled with lily pads.
mm,
So I think we underestimate the absolute scale at which things are changing right now. And we want to keep staying in our comfort zone, even though we know things are changing.
mm. And how would you deal with it when you notice that one of the leaders that you are coaching is underestimating the changes, and how can you know, deliver the message and motivate them to be more proactive instead of being reactive?
I first ask them to examine what are some of their default behaviors that they're engaging in.
Mm,
Which of those are they holding on to for the sake of comfort versus utility now? How is that serving them right now? How is that going to serve them with the pace and rate of change that's going on?
mm,
We are then able to identify a couple of things that are actually holding them back. So it's really looking at your default, because a lot of our default, we don't think about it. We just do it like a reflex action. And that's what requires some pause, some
mm,
deliberation.
mm. What is the thing that scares you the most about the future? A future of work, I mean, we're talking about still professional context.
Well, of course, where things are going to go with AI and how that's going to shape the future of work is both very intriguing, fascinating, exciting, if used well, incredibly powerful. And at the same time, I don't know that as a human race, we will be able to use it with the right boundaries, with the right ethics, with the right values, that where our propensity to have results right now, to have profit right now,
Mm,
may overtake doing this very mindfully so that it does not make us completely irrelevant.
mm. Because the next question I want to ask you, what excites you the most about the future? And I think from what I understood, you can correct me, is it both the same answer, right? Because AI is the most that scares you and also excites you, right?
Completely excites me. And what also excites me is that it actually increases the opportunity for us as human beings to truly bring out what's human about us and
Mm,
what's human in a human to human connection. So it allows us to shine in ways that we're uniquely qualified to do
mm,
and get rid of the noise, get rid of the things that agents can take care of.
mm,
That's what really excites me, our
mm,
humanity.
mm. So my previous guest, Anna Maria Schwab, I mentioned her for the second time. She asked a question in the middle of a polycrisis, and this is something that we are also experiencing right now to some extent. How
Of course.
can we bring more optimism into this environment? What is our circle of influence to create a more optimistic attitude at work? That's a question that she wanted a future guest to answer, and this is what I would like to hear from you.
Mm, mm. To me, the optimism has to be really grounded in all emotions. That optimism is not the same as joy or
Mm,
happiness.
mm,
And if we simply peddle happiness, if we think, oh, our goal is to be happy, we put lipstick on the pig. We lose what it truly means to be vital, a vitality, to have vitality. That as human beings, we need to experience all sorts of emotions. So optimism comes from a place of being free to experience the full range of emotions
mm,
so that we can remind ourselves of what makes us human, what makes us vital, and how do we move that forward. In the business, it's about grounding ourselves with the purpose. What is
mm,
it that we truly, truly want to do? And a purpose is not the revenue number. Purpose is why are you here? Why are you doing this job versus something else?
mm,
Why is this organization in existence versus something else? You'll always have a P&L sheet and all the finance numbers, but why are you truly here? So I think grounding in that purpose keeps us optimistic, keeps us reminded of why we're doing what we're doing despite the polycrises around us.
mm. Since we started with intention and you talked about purpose and you mentioned values, I'm curious to hear from you. What are your top three core values, if you'd like
Mm.
to share?
There are some foundational ones like integrity and so on that I obviously espouse. But beyond that, for me, it's about time. I really value time. And I notice that I get irritated and snippy and not my best self if I have a perception, may not be the reality, that somebody is wasting my time. That
Mm,
that's a good cue to me that I really value that. That
mm,
whole one life to live is very, very important for me in
mm,
every second of my time. So time is a huge one. Love is another important one. And am willing to sacrifice many of my values for my loved ones. So at one point, I had a realization that more important than being inspirational, inspiring others, I want to love and be loved by people. It's a fundamental foundational value for me. So I'll stick with those two.
okay. And what is the question that you would like me to ask a future guest? Something that you are curious about and you want to hear a new perspective on it.
What a great idea, Omar. So, every action has a reaction.
Mm,
How will you know what reactions your actions have? What can you put in place to be smarter about your actions
mm,
so that they elicit the reactions that you want?
mm. Thank you. I will do this. Do you have an answer
Oh,
or
I
no, you
don't. I
don't?
think it's different for every person.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Sabina. I really enjoyed the conversation with you. It's not only about the topics, it's also about your energy. And I felt it's like my perception, if I may say, with all your success and everything I know about you, when I got to know you here, I felt you were a very humble person. And this connection that you were talking about, I already felt it here. So thank you for everything, for your work, for the purpose that you are living. And I would like to ask you the final question in this podcast, which is, how do you celebrate success and life in general?
I am a work in progress on that, Omar. First of all, thank you for your kind words. I'm honored. And in terms of celebrating success, I didn't used to do it at all. I would just succeed and go, okay, next. Okay, next. All right, what's going on? And then I was in India doing a big keynote. One of my friends, one of my really good friends from university, flew to the city I was in and watched the talk. I got a standing ovation from the people who were there. It was a large audience. She thought it was phenomenal. People are just gushing about the talk and what they've learned from it and how they're going to go try these things. And as soon as we go up to the hotel room, I talked to her about, well, so what I'm really worried about now is this thing I have to do next week.
Mm.
She said, and as only a good friend, longtime friend can say, she said, what is wrong with you? What is wrong with you? Why are you doing this to yourself? Can you just take a moment and simply honor the wonderful magic that was just created in this room, these hundreds and hundreds of people? And that has really stopped me in my tracks. So I do celebrate success. I create a pause. And somebody had told me, another wise colleague had said, hey, your book is coming out. It's going to be crazy busy leading up to the book. You're going to be on all these podcasts and shows and interviews. Make sure you carve out time on the day of your book being published to celebrate. And so on the day of my book publishing, I deliberately did not take any interviews. We went out to dinner as a family and celebrated. So I just try to acknowledge something and I give it a lag time. Like when something is accomplished, take some time, whether it's a minute, whether it's a day, whether it's multiple days, to recognize that, to celebrate that, to be grateful to whoever you need to be grateful for. Now, by the way, when I talk about accomplishments, it's not success in the traditional sense. Let me give you an example. I am training for my second marathon. I am way behind on my training, objectively. Like people will tell you, oh gosh, Sabina, I don't know if you're going to make the marathon. And I don't know. But you know what I'm going to do on the day of that marathon on May 3rd? I'm going to celebrate. I'm going to celebrate, of course, if I finish that marathon. I'm going to celebrate if I finish that marathon after they've shut down the course. And I'm going to celebrate even if I don't step a foot onto the course at the starting line of that marathon, because it's still an accomplishment. I thought about doing it. I worked hard, maybe not as hard as I needed to win, to qualify and to start the race. But I'm also going to celebrate that I knew the wisdom, the difference between doing something and doing something well.
Thank you very much, Sabina. I told you this is the last question. I love also how we ended the last one. I'm gonna give you space, no question. If there's any final thoughts, anything you'd like to share with people who are listening to the podcast.
Well, we've talked about a lot of things. And the last thing I will share with people is the idea of micro habits. That is to do the biggest mistake you can make is take 5 things from this conversation and now start to do them all on. That's just not how it works. We just talked about running. I couldn't even run a mile 4 years ago, and now I'm running marathons. It didn't start by running 10 miles. It started by increasing it from 1 mile to 1.1 miles. So take something and then find the smallest, teeniest way you can make it habitual, but do it every single day.
Tiny habits. Thank you, Sabina. I really enjoyed the conversation. I wish you all the best with everything, all the future projects you have.
Thank you so much, Omar.
Congratulations for listening until the end. You are in the top 25% of listeners. Studies show that we forget up to 70% of what we hear within 24 hours. But when we repeat an insight by sharing it with someone, commenting, or journaling it, it moves into long-term memory. So now tell me, what are your 1 to 3 takeaways you're keeping from this conversation? Enjoy every moment. Until next time.